Our heroes find themselves on the edge of Drakkenheim. The city is in shambles. Rubble and ruin just littering the streets. A strange purplish haze kind of clinging to all the rocks, dampening the sounds of the city and their movements. Though as our adventurers enter the city, they realize there's hardly any sound to begin with. It's very abnormally quiet in this place. It's like the city itself is super still, almost as though it's holding its breath. As they step into the city, Morgan, taking the lead, she's on edge, and she realizes as they enter the city that everything here seems gray, as if the color and life in this world is just being siphoned away somewhere. They meander the streets for a time searching for crystals. Harmon mentions that they may have the best luck if they move further into the city, closer to the walls, as he's sure that things on the outskirts have been picked over. So Morgan agrees and leads them further into the ruins before she spots two things. One, in the ruins of a large building, completely collapsed building, is a small crater, something glittering inside of it. Two, she sees not one, not two, but 7 shambling creatures roaming the streets, all humanoid, arms, legs, that kind of thing. Before they are spotted, Zelda falls to her favorite spell, thaumaturgy, and she tries to call the haze hulks, though they don't know that that's what they're called, further away from them. However, this ends up putting some of the creatures between them and that crater. So the group decides, why don't we try to stealth up and flank them while they are distracted? I should add that this is a simulation as to what happened, not exactly what happened, because Mama ain't got the mental capacity to memorize everything, like every turn that happened in this battle. Most of the party very easily get into position, but of course our lovely cleric Noct stumbles, clanging his metallic armor against the stonework that he's trying to hide behind. This instantly draws the eye of 4 of these haze husks, and the rest of the group moves to defend their cleric friend. In the process, Harmon does take out one of the husks, which on closer inspection he sees they are covered in delerium crystals that have just fused to their body and are coming out of all these gashes and wounds. But as he destroys this one, it explodes, the crystals turning into glitter that kind of hover in the air for a brief second before he sucks them in, feeling them invade his lungs and making him very strangely itchy. Harmon shouts out not to breathe in when they explode, and then the battle resumes, Delilah and Morgan taking out quite a few, Zelda running some interference as well, until Noct steps up with a turn undead, causing many of the remaining foes to flee. Morgan chases after a few of them, and I'll be honest, it's a blur of activity. All the haze husks are defeated except for one who does rush off into the distance away. The group checks over the bodies of the husks, hoping to find some shards, delerium shards, or some of the remaining crystals, but they realize that they have all pretty much just turned to dust, and that dust is just blowing and sweeping across the streets. They instead turn to the crater. Harmon begins the meticulous process of extracting the crystals, placing them into his specialized box that he had commissioned and had picked up earlier that day from the blacksmith. And he's wearing, of course, gloves and using his tongs so that he does not get, hopefully, further contaminated. As they finish collecting the crystals, they see 3 rough and tumble looking humanoids approach. These ones do not look like any crystal zombies, as they are calling the haze husks. Even at first glance, the party can tell that these are kind of bandits. Harmon surmises that they are a part of the Queen's men. A large fellow with a very large axe steps up and shouts, "You better turn over all your findings to someone more capable before you get hurt." Morgan steps up to the plate here, threatening them to back off before she actually gets angry. This forces the lead guy to take a step back, but it's not quite enough. He's still defensive. So Zelda uses her thaumaturgy again to reinforce her friend, telling them in a booming voice to back off, like her friend suggested. They begin to turn tail at that and run, but before they get too far, Harmon shouts out, "Yeah, this is our territory now." And this gives them pause. Territory, I feel at least, is a sore subject amongst the Queen's men. Each gang is trying their best to gain more territory from other gangs, and the Queen of Thieves doesn't care as long as they are making their dues. She doesn't care how much territory each group has. But the gangs in the Queen's men are fighting over it constantly. So the main guy turns around on his heel shouting, "Your territory? I'll have you know that it's actually our territory." And before he can get any further in his thought process, a very angry barbarian chucks her axe directly at him. It lands right into his chest, killing him instantly. The remaining turn and flee, not wishing to end up like their dead friend. The group checks over his things, finding a few potions of healing and some more fragments that are in a bag. And they take their findings and they return to Emberwood. With Morgan leading the pack, they actually end up avoiding all danger and end up back in Emberwood pretty safe. They take their delerium to Gainsbury to sell. Zelda, not interested in selling or buying anything, strikes out on her own to go to the manor again, hell-bent on uncovering its secrets. Armin offers to buy the delerium from Harmon at half price, but through careful negotiation, Harmon acquires a deal to continue to sell strictly to Gainsbury for a slightly higher rate and to trade directly for some supplies. They do not sell all their crystals and instead take some of them with them to the chapel. During this time, Zelda sets up to watch Evetide Manor. She takes out her spyglass purchased the day before and ends up trying to use the spyglass to watch the place. In her eagerness, she fumbles with it and drops it on a large rock, shattering the lens. It was a crit fail. So instead, she decides to move up to the building to search it. She picks up her broken spyglass, tucks it away, and moves to the door. The building is old and rickety, and the upper floors are completely burned down. The smell of charred and decaying wood is all that she can smell, and she peeks into the nearest window, which is so covered in soot and dust she can't even see anything beyond the panes, though she can tell there's not any furniture in there at least. She moves to the door and she knocks. Nothing happens, so she tries to open the door and it swings open, revealing a foyer with a staircase that leads both up and down. Looking up the staircase, it leads to a landing, but mostly all she sees is the sky, as the second floor has been completely burned down. Instead, she ends up going downwards, hearing and seeing nothing really. She reaches the bottom landing and it opens up into a square cobblestone room. All the things in this room have been removed. There's nothing left. She listens, but ends up getting distracted. Another fail. And decides instead to return and get Harmon. But on her way out, she uses her tail as her tiefling tail to tap against the walls to hear any discrepancies in the stones, and hears and feels nothing strange on her way out. Knocked at the chapel meets High Flamekeeper Ophelia Reed of the Silver Order. He offers some of the crystals they have procured, and Ophelia thanks them and says that they must be destroyed. Delilah, of course, insists on seeing them destroyed, and Ophelia just waves her hand. Sure, why not? So some of the members of the Silver Order move in to take the crystals. They place them on a pedestal, and one of them reads from a scroll that puts this glistening little dome over the crystals themselves. Nobody can tell what spell this was, before an orange flame descends from the heavens and lands upon the crystals, shattering them into dust. They wait till the residue falls before dropping the magic dome. Ophelia knocks attention back to her, asking for his aid since he and his group have obviously proven they can enter the city and return with little damage. And at that, Harmon asks if she has the ability to heal contamination. He offers some of the remaining crystals as payment for that, and does indeed reduce his level of contamination. Drat. Before Ophelia does start talking about this other quest. Recently, she tells them, a group of adventurers have found evidence that the scepter of Saint Vitruvio lies within the chapel of Saint Brenna. Unfortunately, the adventuring party she got this information from had a falling out, and Ophelia now believes that not only does her group know, but the Queen's men and the followers of the falling flame have also gotten word of this find, and she will not let this scepter fall into the hands of thieves or heretics. She asks them to go to this chapel and bring her that item. Delilah, who also doesn't trust anything to do with these crystals, and definitely not the falling flame folks, because they believe that the crystals are sent from the heavens for their use, and she does not trust anybody who wants to use these crystals for anything. Delilah decides she will not let it fall into their hands and urges Noct to take this quest. He does, agreeing to meet Ophelia with the scepter, hopefully, at Camp Dawn. The group no longer has any crystals, and they step out to meet with Zelda. But as they step out of the chapel, they run into Ansem Lang. He looks distraught, eyes a little red and puffy. He also looks like he has a bandage on his shoulder that he has recently been applied. And most notably, though, is the fact that the young girl the party had seen him with yesterday is nowhere to be seen. He turns to them and goes, please, a moment. I have a request. He tells them how his sister has been taken. He needs a party such as them to go rescue her. He explains they were on a mission that turned south very fast when they were ambushed. And against orders, he did track the ratlings to the Rat's Nest Tavern, where they then attacked him. He was not able to get inside to rescue his sister. He's sure she's alive because the ratlings love to keep their meat fresh and often take prisoners in such cases. He begs them to go, but also adds that this is not sanctioned by the Hooded Lanterns. He is not allowed to disobey orders to go inside, but he can pay and he can put a good word in with the commander if they need. At the talk of money, of course, Morgan is like, hey. So she would love to assist because she needs to pay off her debt. And so they take the job, agreeing to go first thing in the morning to find his sister. They regather their party at the Bark and Buzzard for a meal and ale before bed, but Zelda implores Harmon to come with her to the manor because she thinks she's found something. He does with a sigh and follows her to the manor once more. When they arrive, the door is open, which is exactly how Zelda left it. And Zelda tries to sneak up to the building, but Harmon realizes immediately that she's making way too much noise for sneaking, so he doesn't even bother. Zelda leads them into the basement where once again she begins tapping on the walls, but this time she goes further in and begins tapping on the back wall where she hits a brick that her tail just goes straight through. Harmon ushers her back and then reaches in and feels a lever. He pulls it and it slides open a section of the wall in the back. Harmon looks, but he doesn't see anything out of the ordinary. Before he enters, he tells Zelda to go get the others, and Harmon slinks into the corner to wait while Zelda rushes back to get their friends. While Harmon is waiting here, he hears a pop of arcane energy, and he watches as a cloaked figure steps up to the doorway, mutters something. There's a brief flash, something on the floor. Then the figure steps through the door, disappears, and the door closes behind him. And Harmon listens and hears his footsteps go up and out of the house. A few moments later, the rest of the group arrives, and Harmon asks if they saw anything, and they didn't. Harmon opens the door again, everyone gathers around, and he steps inside, activating a glyph of warning that he didn't see, and it ends up harming both himself, Zelda, and Morgan, who are up close behind him. When it clears, though wounded, everyone is still standing. They search the room and find a one-way teleportation circle, and they decide to leave and rest. And they will figure out the circle at a later date, possibly after they go save Miss Petra. I did a lot of stuff wrong in this part, but I think it'll work out for the better. I really enjoyed the contamination, but I definitely didn't write any of the prices down. And then I also made it too cheap, which is fine. They ended up healing their first level of contamination for way a third of the price. And it's fine because I think I can very easily, hand wave this one and fix it later by simply increasing the price, as maybe like a bunch of adventures all get hit at the same time, and that makes the price go up, you know, supply and demand, and then it just stays there. I think that'll also kind of make the world seem like it's always changing and moving and things are always happening, and they're not the only groups there and stuff like that. So I think it'll work out for the best, but it was something I messed up in the fly. I also felt like I needed to know more about the Queensmen, because even though it's not a faction they are actively they are actively interacting with them. They're not working for them, but they're going to run into them a lot. I feel like they're the ones that keep popping up, both because I keep rolling it on the table, but also because one of them is a rogue, so he has some ties with that group, not directly, but indirectly. And so I do think that they should come up more. I also think I need to work on some rivals. I have one rival from Harmon. Harmon has a family heirloom to that rival that he uses to attack with. So I do think I need to bring that aspect into the game a little bit, but I just don't know in the scheme of things where that'll fit quite yet. By the end of session 2, the motivations of the party to me are way clearer. So I did manage to drop hints about everybody's personal quests throughout session 2, which I, didn't really have the ability to prep in session 1 since I went from 0 to 1 all in one go. And so I do think I need to focus on some of those personal quests more, but I'm also feeling more comfortable with the world as a whole. So I think I'm able to adjust it and manipulate it a little bit better. And even by session 3, I'm even better at it. And as I'm prepping, right now I'm prepping to go into session 4, and I feel like I own this world a little bit more. So that's really good. I'm just feeling less constricted by the book overall. The personal quests are going to be the best way for me to interject my own take on the world. So I need to lean into those more. And I'm realizing that now as I'm prepping for session 4. Let's talk about session prep for session 3. So I read and reread and read and reread the Rat's Nest Tavern and the Chapel of St. Brenna. I wrote out my monsters, and I did jot down some key items for each adventure. I also tried to focus on what I would need to do for Zelda, because obviously in this, she hyper-focused on that manor, which is not necessarily bad. It did have a secret, but it's not a secret that they can even do anything with. So spoiler, go away if you don't want a spoiler, but it's just a place that the Amethyst Academy sends their mages from outside of Drakkenheim and Emberwood into this place using a teleportation circle in that basement. But they haven't interacted with the Amethyst Academy at all. However, I don't think that any of them are going to be close to that group of people or that faction. And so it could be the opportunity to have them looking for people who have disturbed their stuff and maybe flag them as potential enemies. Not enemies yet. They haven't done anything to hurt an Amethyst Academy person, but that could be the start of it. What Zelda has done has led to this, which would be interesting, I think, and also to challenge her in that way, I guess, is a good way of putting it. I do think I need to try to funnel her energy into something that is more aligned with the rest of the group, right? Without feeling like I'm railroading her. But her personal quest is she wants to claim the throne. And so I think the way I'm going to do that is I've written up a note that a bandit will conveniently drop that essentially outlines where he has overheard these rumors about where the seals of Drakkenheim are. And I think dropping that and giving her just like a little bit of here's a secret you can start getting, and maybe even hinting at some of like the importance of each item, like what they do. Maybe that will help push her and steer her into wanting to find those items. And that will kind of more directly align with how I think they're going to explore the city. Maybe, we'll see. She's been playing every week so far, which is good. I also do have a small worry that she will eventually just drop out, which is okay, but they're gonna probably want to still get the items. So we'll see. Other things I didn't prep but needed to prep, and I had planned on prepping for session 3, was more city maps, But I ran out of time to do that because mama don't have time. And I do feel like reading and reviewing both of those quest lines kind of set me up for like 2 or 3 sessions in advance, because it's going to take them a couple sessions to get through the rat's nest, and then probably a couple sessions to get through the chapel. But session 3 was where I really kind of stopped worrying so much about following the book to a T, and actually started to feel more comfortable in the GM chair again, which is also something that just I have to feel, I guess. But we'll talk about all of that in the next video. Yay.